Hello. Um, this is a recording. I'm going to kind of experimenting using Zoom, which will allow us to meet also. I'm Glenn Tracy. This is TE 825, English Language Learners, Culture, Civil Rights, and Advocacy. We're going to have approximately a little over 4 weeks, or roughly 4 weeks, June 8th through July 10th for this class. It's going to be focused on the legal rights and civil rights of English language learners and their families, knowledge about their culture, which I'll briefly kind of compress into about a week, and then also the culmination of this is impressing on all of you the importance of being an advocate for the English language learners. You see, in the local schools, you're going to be the person that's in charge of seeing that they get a fair shake. If you wait for someone else to do it, it won't happen. So, I just want to get that point across because it's very important. Adjust my image there. Okay, move that up. Now, if you look at the syllabus, I usually don't get everything covered. I have great intentions. Sometimes great intentions are not always going to be fulfilled. We have two books. This is Language Rights and the Law in the United States. It's kind of an older book. It's great history. It talks about language rights, native language restrictions, a history of language rights. We're going to use about the first half of this. I think it's about the only book really this comprehensive even deals with this subject. And the second book is Literacy and Language Diversity in the United States. I'm going to supplement this with new information. This is about an 05 book. Point being that they don't make these that often. There's a few other books that are available, but they're not quite as comprehensive. And these are books that will give you a chance to really look at the history of it, as would be appropriate for a graduate class. If you look on page, I'm kind of flipping through the syllabus, so if you want to look at it at the same time, if you want to print it out, look at it on your page. The first thing I want to have by this Tuesday, and your response to the one thing I'm going to be asking this year is that you respond to everybody in the class. You don't have to write 2 paragraphs to everybody, just 3 or 4 lines to each person. You may want to say more if you see something in their introduction that sparks your interest. So I want this on Tuesday, and then hopefully everybody will have their responses in to the other people by Sunday. So I can look at these, and there'll be, I've got the points on that. I think I put 28 points on this first one. And then we're going to have 4 succeeding discussion entries on Thursdays, beginning on the 18th. And those will be 18 points each. I try to make this add up to 300. I've got to hear a phone call, which may be a Zoom call. Okay. That'll be between the 23rd and 27th. I'll be in Virginia approximately about 7 days starting next Monday. And I'll come back, and then that week at some point, I want to do one of these little Zoom conferences, maybe with more than one person at a time. We can have a discussion. We'll see how this works. Then a couple of position papers, one on June 29th on the legal challenges faced by ELLs. I'll be giving you some resources for that. Now, these papers are not to be research papers, but I would like you to have I'll tell you something like 3 works cited where you've seen some scholarly work, and I'm not opposed to things that aren't necessarily in a journal, but are good quality reports dealing with the situation of English language learners. So there are a couple of papers there, one on the challenges and another one on language rights and U.S. law, due on the July 26th. And then I'm going to send you a final exam. It'll be due back on the 11th. It's only 50 points. It's not a killer exam, but it's just kind of to follow up on some of the main points that we will cover. I got some videos now. Some of you have already seen these videos. In fact, I can't be sure. I've used so many different videos that you may say, oh, I've already seen that. You probably haven't seen all of them, so I'll encourage you to look at them. On here, I list 4 major ones. 9500 Liberty, which if you have taken a class of mine in the past, you may have seen that. It's a story of a town in Virginia that decided to try to make its own immigration law enforcement and caused all kinds of backlash and political protests. And it was the town of Manassas, which ironically was the first battle of the Civil War was fought there. How interesting. But it's also an interesting video because it covers the actual divisions between people, and not just English language, but the general people of color in the town, and police stopping them and seeing if their papers are correct or not. And with all the other aspects of conflict we've seen lately with shootings and accusations against the police and accusations flying both directions, I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say this is just part of society. This is part of American society, and something needs to be done about it. Now our focus can be ESL, but ESL can also involve people that can be victimized. Okay, so that is 9500 Liberty. I got one called New Faces on Main Street. This is very generic, kind of a nice, soft presentation talking about the upper Midwest, particularly Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, a little bit of Nebraska is included. And it deals with second language learners, particularly people from obviously Hispanic countries in the South, Central America, but also people from Southeast Asia. And I like it because a lot of people don't realize the Hmong, Hmong, are a tribal people from Laos, Laos, Laos and Southeast Asia. We bombed Laos all the time and had CIA in there during the Vietnam War, but we never actually invaded it officially. We officially invaded other places, and some places we invaded and didn't talk about it. See Apocalypse Now if you want to know more about it. That's a good movie. God Grew Tired of Us. This deals with the refugees from South Sudan. They were called the Lost Boys. Okay, this is not the movie with the vampires. That was another movie about 1989. Now, this is a movie about young men who lost their families, their sisters, their mothers, and certainly their fathers and brothers, and barely escape with their lives. It's a horrible genocide. That's Sudan. This situation hasn't disappeared yet. Do you speak American? Now, this is this is strictly internal. It's a series of 3 45-minute DVDs that you'll be able to watch through UNK on my Blackboard. All these will be on Blackboard. And they deal with how the English language varies in the United States. Northeasterners, Mid-Atlantic, people in the South, trucker English, good old boy English, I call it, Jeff Foxworthy, Cajun French English down there in Louisiana, Spanglish, Spanish, Texas English, immigration issues and language in Arizona, and finally West Coast and Valley Talk. That's kind of passé now. The 80s, so Clueless and movies like that. It goes all the way up to Seattle. So it talks about a variety of people, not just people of color, but people of regional different cultures, not just skin color. I find skin color a pretty meaningless way to describe American culture. It's the environment you grew up in, it's expectations. You can't look at somebody and say, oh, that person speaks this language or that language. You don't know what their background is. The world's much too much in a state of flux for you to it used to be years ago, supposedly there were linguists that could tell you what county you were from or your family was from in the United States based on your accent. And it's funny about us, we all get very paranoid about our accent. We worry about it. I found out once my accent was basically southern central Oklahoma, and it bothered me because I thought, well, I didn't grow up in Oklahoma, so how could that be? I'm from Missouri, and I don't even say Missouri. I say Missouri, and I realized that my mother was from central Oklahoma, and you pick up a lot of your accent from your parents, and in particular the mother, and you'll find that in cultures that when we talk about dual language or the loss of the first language, it's often the grandmother who keeps the language alive. That's true of people that immigrated from Germany, from Sweden, as well as from Mexico and Central America. A lot of us in Nebraska or wherever you are for this class, our ancestors, we may have memories of our great-grandmother speaking with a strange accent or not speaking English at all. Now, and I'm from Lexington, Nebraska right now. I've lived there since '97. And of course, we have had a dramatic change in immigration. We went from a town that in the 1980s was 99% what's called white, which basically means European, German, Swedish, etc. immigrants who had been there for about 100 years. We switched to a situation where now it's 67 to 75% Hispanic in the town, and we also have about 10 to 12% African refugees. Somalia, but not just Somalia. We have Ethiopians. Somalis on the east coast of Africa. It's where if you saw the movie about Captain, what was that? The captain that had the oil tanker that was taken. He was taken hostage, Captain Phillips. That was Somali pirates. We don't have pirates in Lexington, but it just gives you an idea of the diversity. Okay, well, now, the one thing I want to emphasize, and if this video gets too long, I may have trouble getting it in place. The first thing I wanted you to do is introduce yourself. Now, you go to the discussion, and you're going to write 4 long paragraphs, and they're going to basically deal with you talking about your background. I'm going to have you do a culture map, and I've got this on page 5 of the syllabus. You're going to do a culture map, and you're going to say, what is a culture map, and what's the purpose of it? Well, I'm going to give you an example. Here's one. I'm looking at it backwards, so it's all confusing to me. I think I may have to change that. But on the settings here, but essentially this is Grand Island. You see the Island Oasis Water Park and Grand Island Movie Theater, Tornado Hill, which if you're from Grand Island, you know there's a Tornado Hill. They had the Night of the Twisters in 1980, about 35 years ago. I don't know much about it, but I've seen the movie.
Why not? You're fired. You can't fire him. Why not? He quit.
Three Stooges clock. Sorry, if I have the lights on, they're loud and obnoxious. Okay, this is Skate Island, which I have no idea. I guess you skate there and it's not really an island, right? I don't think it freezes that much. The State Fair is now in Grand Island. Aha, that's something you probably didn't know, unless you're from there or from Nebraska. And finally up here, it's got Grand Island Public Schools, Northeast School, Central Catholic, and Heartland Lutheran. So here is some this is a map of this person's, and what is a map? The culture map is a map of what's important to you in your town where you grew up. Now, let's say you grew up in 2 places. I have a student from Hastings who grew up in Hastings, but came from Vietnam. Okay? And they have Hastings on this side, and they decided to put the water park. Okay? It's kind of an island or a water motif, I guess. And over here we've got palms and stuff, but this is Vietnam. Now, this is the beach in Vietnam. I don't know, I can't remember where Yen's from exactly, but in Vietnam, but you know, this is how you could divide it up if you had two places you grew up that influenced you. And you can make these as complicated. I've had people turn them into road maps, very detailed. It tells you something. All of this tells stuff about the person who makes the map, because the map is an artifact. And in one of our initial lessons, you're going to learn what is culture. It's what we do as an activity. It's what we believe in, and it's what we make, or things we create. My office is full of artifacts. I'm drinking some pina colada, just juice, okay? It's very good too. I've got paper, I've got the computer I'm using. Zoom is the thing I'm using to record this. Essentially what I have here, my office is full of artifacts of 21st century educational institution. Okay, in my case, ESL and multiculturals a lot. You can see the library in here. I'll show you more later. I like Zoom because I can just pull a book out and say, look at this. But artifacts are things that as primitive as a stone that people first used to put in their hands. They could use it to knock the head up, you know, knock out a rat or something for dinner or whatever. What people believe, the beliefs in the head, you know, you're manifested by churches or institutions of learning or whatever, but that what people believe, and then their activity, their activity. What do you do? Well, I'm teaching. What do you do? Well, you know, may have somebody, they move furniture like I did today to help my son move into his new apartment. And that was fun. Finally, it quit raining. Now the phone rings. I'm going to stop recording right now, and I'll come back in a minute and do another one.